Hi, everyone. Welcome to the June 5th instance of SIG Documentation. For today, do not have any items on the agenda, I believe. And so we can just have a random birds of a feather conversation if anyone has any topics they want to bring up and take it from there. Oh, actually, we do have one, maybe one. I'm checking right now. Yep, yeah, we're open for agenda items if anyone has any. Um, The one that I was going to bring up, mainly because we saw it in chat on Zulip, but we had a comment from a community member around the concept of the fact that we don't have any examples with Watt in the book. And that was something that Ivan and I explicitly did. We were focused on avoiding Watt and instead using language tooling. But the point that this person is making is that language tooling can change. And obviously, we've seen some instability in the past, but Watt is pretty stable and sometimes can help illuminate some of the core concepts. So, I think we could have a discussion around whether we think that is something that we should add um, and whether it should live within the component book or maybe it should live within wazi.dev.
Yeah, I see both sides of the argument, both for not kind of adding that additional piece that someone coming from a guest language would need to learn in order to kind of get through the concepts, but at the same time, the stability of it, of what makes sense. And it might provide sort of like a clear, stable path to elucidating some concepts. It seems like it probably makes more sense to have that available than to not. Other thoughts on that?
I have, I think I have the opinion that we should not include what, or if we do, it should be an appendix or kind of the last option in the line of language options. What is like I deal with WebAssembly components on a fairly low level on a daily basis, and I struggle to read Watt, even though it's my job to like understand it and to deal with it. And that's totally okay because Watt is by design as low level as it can get. It is really just a textual representation of what's in the binary, and we don't, it would be impossible for somebody to come up with a binary representation that's also very easy to read for humans. That's just not fair. So I think that that's fine. We should let Watt be what it is, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily need to expose people to it. On the other hand, what I would do instead, if we're worried about like, well, which language do we pick, or language tooling changes often, is instead present users with sort of opaque components that are already pre-built, and say these components exist. They exist on a registry, for instance. If you want to learn how to build components yourself, here's the section on how to build components where you can pick your language, and we'll show you in your language how to build it. For all other kind of aspects of tooling or explanation around components, we sort of assume you already have a component and you may have gotten that component from a registry. And then we can show you the tools that allow you to poke at that component and understand it at a level that is kind of sufficient for the tutorial, like using something like WASM tools component width, for instance, to show the world that a component exposes. Is one way to do that, so that people can understand what this thing is at the kind of boundary level, which is the only place that they really need to understand the component. And they don't need to understand how the component was built. It's already there for them to use. So I think that would be the direction that I would like to see us going.
I like that a lot. I think that makes a ton of sense. I don't see the harm of talking about the WAD approach in like an appendix or something, but there is a potential harm in foregrounding it too much and kind of giving the misapprehension that that's a preferred route or a prerequisite. So I just agree with all of that. That makes a ton of sense.
And just to summarize the reasoning, it sounds like the reason we didn't want to include what is that the component book is supposed to be approachable and supposed to illustrate the way you should be building components, and what is neither of those two things.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think to kind of build on top of that, there's two things that we want to talk about in the component book. One is building components. So I have I know a programming language and I would like to build a WebAssembly component using that programming language. That's one aspect. And then the other aspect is I have a component that I either built or somebody else built, and I want to do something with it. I want to run it. I want to compose it with other components. I want to manipulate it in some way or understand it or, poke at it in some way. And for that second thing there, you don't need to first show, well, this is how you build the component in order to do that. You can just say the component already exists. And now we're going to do something additional with it.
And there's even value in showing, hey, it doesn't matter how you created this component or from what source.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know where we are with regards to the ability to host some of those demo components in a Bytecode Alliance registry?
Um, I have talked to Lan recently, who is working on some of the tooling there. And it's my understanding that things are kind of dangerously close, but not quite there. But I think they've been dangerously close before. And so it's kind of a little bit up in the air. I don't know if I don't necessarily know if like applying more pressure by saying, hey, we have a real use case for having a registry here that would help with this. Maybe that helps. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but maybe it's something we can mention in Zulip to say that we're planning to use the registry for this purpose if we haven't already.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. I was talked to Calvin and attended SIG Registries, their last meeting, and they're going through some refactoring. In fact, the proposal for them is actually to reframe their role and purpose as SIG packaging and not SIG registries, and not specifically be built around registry work exclusively. And so that's happening. And there's been other conversations sort of as a hypothetical. Well, at some point, the Bytecode Alliance is going to want to put its seal of approval on an instance of a registry somewhere, presumably. And there was some preliminary work to stand up an example registry, which is no longer online. So I think there, as Ryan points out, this a sort of we've orbited around this point a few times, but never actually landed anything. So I think it would be good to have a specific conversation like we were just discussing, which is we have a specific use case. We have a need that would dovetail with other things. It's more a question of where's the right place to do this, and is this the opportunity for us to take that step finally? But maybe that's a SIG documentation to SIG registry / packaging conversation we can have on Zulip.
I was going to go ahead and change topics if we feel like um, I was curious, Eric, how you feel like the wazi.dev site's being received. I feel like we did a quick push on that, and I was wondering if you feel like we need to circle back and look at it again.
I haven't gotten much sort of feedback from outside immediate groups that would push me in any particular direction on that. I think there are things missing there that I would like to see there when there's the time, perhaps. But some of it is also material that arguably makes sense in the component model book or is already there. So there's that kind of question of, they have some gray area space where the Venn diagrams on the Venn diagram of their kind of domains. I mean, I'd like to see a little more about reading interfaces and using them, but that could just be pointing over to related documentation on the component book. But those are my kind of major thoughts about gaps there. Anyone else have any material they would like to see there that isn't there already that we can kind of frame as a task to work on in the near future?
I'm curious how many of the like in progress proposals we want to include. So, for example, if a interface is moved into phase 1 or phase 2, do we move it into wazi.dev? And how that could help with discoverability potentially for getting people to collaborate on these interfaces.
Mhm.
Um, so like some of the stuff that the embedded working group has been working on, for example, I feel like they're picking up pace and have a lot of interfaces that they're working on now. So it might be nice to point some of the developers to there and say, hey, if you're working on interface and want to have it more visible, go ahead and add it to wazi.dev. We could have a section under like in review or basically have the phases laid out there.
That makes a ton of sense to me. And having something more explicit, breaking down the phases in the process. I don't think we have anything sort of to that point right now. Yeah, I love that. And while it's something we'll have to update as things move through the processes, that's not such a churn. I think that's pretty doable. Well, I'm happy to work on that. I can take that as a task to, report back on for the next meeting. If anyone else would like to be involved or work together on that, just let me know.
Feel free to tag me in any PRs or anything.
I had a question that may be something that you all talked about at the last meeting, which apologies for missing, but there was some conversation on Zulip about discoverability. Word you just used, Kate, of the component model documentation, and Ryan had added an issue about increasing the visibility, and we commented a little bit about possible ways that we could do that. And I didn't know if this was a topic you all discussed last time or not, but I figured it would be good to try and keep some of that moving. And in particular, if there were things we felt like we could do on the Bytecode Alliance website or in other places to improve that based on the feedback that we got in Zulip from folks that wanted more information and didn't know it was out there, or maybe wanted some information that we're not necessarily able to effectively point at the moment. So I thought I would ask that. And if you covered it and it's all moving forward, then that's great. But if not, I certainly am in a position to help with getting things on the website or having a conversation with folks about how we could do a better job of addressing some of the discoverability challenges through what we might put on bytecodealliance.org.
I mean, I would love to see it just on the website. I think when I tell people where to find documentation, I have to say go to Bytecode Alliance's GitHub and then type in component book and type in wazi.dev. And it'd be really nice if I would just like go to bytecodealliance.org
Yeah,
and
so
find it there.
I completely agree with you. And I think the website the design of the website is from the early days of the Alliance. And it's been tweaked a little bit. But we have limited places where that kind of information exists on the site today, and it's kind of scattered around. So I think part of this is an opportunity to constructively critique the site and say, okay, well, how would we do? What would we like to do? What would make this easiest? Would we something that's on the homepage somewhere? Do we, if you look at the way the site's constructed. So I think a conversation with folks that have ideas about how we could either appropriately dovetail this into the way the site's architected now, or make some improvements and changes. Either one of those would be conversations I would be happy to have. And I'm not a information management wizard. I can build websites, but that doesn't mean they're awesome. So folks that have better knowledge and expertise here would be great to have their insights.
Just having a learning tab at the top as one of the menu items, I don't know if that's the exact right word, learning, documentation, something, resources, something like that. Seems like that would be great.
Yeah, and it would be good to anticipate future needs so that we can make a change now. We create some spot like that that encompasses the kind of thing we'd like to do in the short term, but other, learning pathways or getting started guide or that kind of thing. And framing it that way, because we don't want to have too many. We already did some cleanup on the menu bar at the top, so putting something back there is not a problem, but putting one thing there's probably good, but 3 or 4 would not be such a great idea. So we'll give that some thought. Maybe we can talk about that in chat in Zulip, and say, okay, what ideas do we have for a simple change we could make to the website that would open up the opportunity to do the kind of things we'd like to do here. Like, for example, we don't even have any information on the site about the fact that we have SIGs. So we have a project page that lists our 4 current hosted projects. Well, 4 of our current hosted projects, but not all of them. We don't mention anything about the SIGs and their activities. So there are opportunities for us to make more information more available, but not turn the site into an encyclopedic. I can't find anything. So anyway, thanks.
We have that events calendar too, right?
We have an events calendar, and in fact, we've got SIG Community. It just had their first meeting yesterday, and that's a thing that they will be taking ownership for, and we're working on how to do that as we spin that SIG up. So yeah, we'll have a calendar. There's just a number of things coming, and constructively anticipating them in some enhancements to the website feels like a good thing to do. So yeah, thanks. Maybe we'll chat about this. Start on because we may be in the best position to articulate some of these needs, and then we can see what other folks think.
Is this site within the Bytecode Alliance GitHub repository? Would this be better suited as a discussion as a GitHub issue?
We could, it is, so the site is inside the Bytecode Alliance repository. So bytecodealliance.org is one of our repos, and we have a separate repo for staging instance in cases where we've made major changes and needed to stage stuff before we pushed it to production. So there is a bytecodealliance.org repo. And so issues could be there. And then we'd figure out where to have the conversation coming up with a proposed design enhancement, probably in parallel, but tied to that GitHub issue.
Yeah, because my question was, I don't know what the format of the site is, but every single tab is just one page. And I think if we could create sub pages with drop-down tabs, that'd be helpful. So about could say like the TOC, SIGs, learning, I think that about tab could really be extended.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where in the 0th month of the Bytecode Alliance, there was we got to have a website, and somebody threw some Jekyll stuff together or whatever, and there it is. And there were some adjustments that got made after that, but nothing major. So yeah, this is really a vestige of the early days of the Alliance, and it's not super sophisticated. But you can see all that structure in the repo and see how it's put together. So yeah, I don't necessarily want to slow down improving the discoverability of component model information by saying, okay, well, we're going to spend 3 months redesigning and rebuilding the website. So if there's a combination of some short-term things we could do that would be beneficial, and then some other things that we could do longer term, I think that's fine too.
So just for clarity, is there buy-in from other SIGs or other groups that we would need to propose changes to the website, or would we just do that directly?
I think if we were doing something that was just very focused, like we'd like to get awareness of the component model book on the website, that would be a fairly straightforward thing to do. But if we have this idea, what we really want to do is enable a richer website. So we want to change the main menu into, a menu nav bar that has sub menus and, redesign the site. Then I think we'd loop other people in, because my guess is, the TSC might have things they'd like, oh yeah, well, if we're gonna, here's some other things we'd like to do, and some of the other SIGs and that sort of thing. So I think we'd float that past, but we could have that conversation on Zulip probably. We wouldn't need to like make a formal pitch to somebody. We could just broadly acquaint people with the idea that we were thinking about it, and then we get their feedback. But there is no website team. This isn't something that a third party is doing and we pay them for it. It is, me and Till and a few others, and we tweak it. So we have the opportunity to make changes, and should be pretty straightforward to do.
Gotcha. It seems like a good item to have sort of recurring on our agenda, maybe to check in and see if people sort of have the bandwidth to take up a task on that, or
and if in particular we can lay some things out here that put opportunities out there for the other SIGs or other working groups or other projects that makes it easier for them to take advantage of, then that's a good thing to do. I think SIG documentation is a great place to sort of facilitate that conversation and have some informed opinions. And then I'm sure we'll get other folks will see that and raise their hand and plug in. So. But yeah, Kate, if you want to file an issue or something on the, did you find the repo? Then we can do that from there. And then that would, because I don't know the future of the issue that Ryan filed on the component docs is, but this may be a way of weaving that into.
Okay, I have another topic change unless the people have other ones. I'll just keep going. Okay. Last meeting we talked about how I think our action step was to all go look at other Bytecode Alliance repositories and see if there were ways we could link in the component book. So maybe they were maybe they were pointing to the upstream WIT documentation where instead they could be pointing to the component book. I did not take that action step. And I don't know if anyone else did, but I wonder if we want to have a place where we're tracking that somehow. And maybe we have an issue that we put up on the component book and flesh out all of the, in that issue, list all of the repos that could be pointing to the component book.
Yeah, that sounds good. I also did not take that action item, but I'm going to make a note of it for next time. And I have to drop here at the half hour, but just to kind of reiterate my action item, I will focus on making sure we elucidate the proposal process and WASI interfaces at different phases of proposal for next time. We'll talk more about it on Zulip, but I'll get some PRs in on that. And take care.
I Do you folks have other items? We could end at the half hour. I feel like we've been pretty productive. Great. Then I will see you all in a couple weeks. Bye, everyone.